Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to Harping on Rugby. This is part of our weekly feature called the 80 Plus column. Our main content each week is our rep podcast, which have analysis of the latest match for Leinster Ireland men's team. And our latest pod was, of course, looking back at Ireland's win in Cardiff at the weekend. You can check that out on all the major platforms. As for this 80 Plus column, well, it's sort of a weekly newsletter taking a quick look at the rest of the rugby world just to see what's going on. But first, a quick reminder about our new presence on Substack. We're posting most of our stuff there now, plus a couple of new features like a weekly article called Broken Play, where I scribble a few general rugby thoughts. And we're also bringing back the Throwback Thursday, looking back over the Harpin archives for an old post that somehow relates to our next feature match. And with Leinster playing Cardiff at the weekend, I picked one out for there. So check that out on Thursday morning and subscribe to our Substack. It's free account while you're at it, please. And also, if you check one back in our pod and video feeds, there's a bonus podcast where I chat to Ailva of the Irish Women's Supporters Club Blue Sky account, looking ahead to the Women's Six Nations, and also introducing her own new podcast called Mudder Ruckers, the Irish Women's Rugby podcast. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Now, this video is all about a segment we call the Front Five, which is a selection of eye-catching, egg-chasing quotes and links from around the rugby media landscape. As you can see, I've got five headings lined up there, so let's just crack on with this week's articles, starting with this one from someone called Over the Hill Prop. Now, he's part of a team of podcasters who do a regular pod called The Provincial State of Mind. It's they're all Munster fans, but they do cover all four provinces in their pods with a Munster kind of slant. And some people would say, well, you're a Leinster podcast, they're a Munster podcast, so you've got to be fighting with each other all the time. I'm like, no, it's not. They do their thing, I do mine. They do a different thing. We focus on Leinster's game every week, or if it's Ireland, we focus on the actual game itself. They do a great general review of all four provinces, but like I say, with a Munster slant, that's what they do. But anyway, this is from Over the Hill Prop. We've had him on the pod before, I think a few years ago, and this is an article titled "Tactical Changes Force a Switch at 10 for Ireland." Now, I did a rant on our rep pod last weekend after the Wales match. I basically have had enough of all this talk about the Sam v Jack debate online, certain sections of it. And what triggered me was a video that someone had made. I presume it was a Munster fan. They took the time within 24 hours of the final whistle. They took the time to clip out all Sam's defensive mistakes, right, in the game. Now, I'm not coming on here to say he didn't make any mistakes, but I'm talking about what motivated him to do this. And I think the reason he did it was he's trying to feed into this narrative that Sam Prendergast is only being picked for the Ireland team because he plays for Leinster. That's the narrative that seems to be driving this video and a lot of these comments online. It's an ongoing narrative, and that just drives me crazy. And I did a rant about this. Now, this is an article from obviously a Munster fan, but also obviously an Ireland fan. And what this article does is it tries to give actual rugby reasons that actually make sense for why Sam is being picked for Ireland. Okay. It's, the quote I've chosen here is he's being picked because his skill set suits what Ireland and Leinster want out of their out half to play off-ball rugby. What he means by off-ball rugby, if you look at, especially in the second half against Wales, you'll see that we started to kick a more territory game. It's a game that trusts our defense. So we pin them back and we trust our defense to keep them down there. And, it worked really well. It wasn't working so well at the start of the second half where a wraparound went wrong and they went down the other end pretty much and scored. But once we started pinning them back and keeping them in their 22 and putting little kicks over them, then that definitely changed the game. And we just basically, once we started doing that, we had control of the match, and we came back and won. Over the Hill Prop here does a great job of actually explaining it in rugby terms. He's got receipts. I won't go through everything he said. Read it yourself. There's a link there on the QR code. He's got receipts. He's got stats. He shows reasons why this Ireland are doing this. Maybe he doesn't agree with this. I'm not saying necessarily he agrees with this, but the results do speak for themselves. I guess they are winning. But now I don't agree with everything in the article. like the quote I've chosen there comes off the back of a sentence which starts with, Prendergast isn't picked at the starting 10 because Ireland wants to develop more depth, and he's not being picked because he has a higher ceiling. And then he goes on to say the quote I have here, that he is being picked because of his skill set. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they can all be true. I think we can argue over the percentages, over the reason, but I think they all can be reasons why he's in the team. There's also the fact, and he does say this in the article, that Jack is, and I've said this before, Jack is kind of held back by his versatility. It's better to have him on the bench. He's almost in what we were originally thinking was a role for Kieran Frawley, in that to have him on the bench gives you someone who can cover 10, who can cover 12, who can cover 15. That's a really good option. But if you're looking to start, if you want to start these big test matches, it's not so good for you. It's handy for the squad. It's becoming more a squad-based game, I know, but the starting jersey is the one that everybody wants. So it's an interesting article. Read it yourself. Come up with your own thoughts and whatever, and think what you mean. At the end, he does reference Sam's defense. He does say at one stage, to paraphrase what we say on the Provincial State of Mind podcast about the scrum, and that's about Porter, I'm assuming, Prendergast's defense won't matter until it does. Okay, so that kind of leaves a bit of wiggle room, so that if he does make a mistake that costs us big in a game and we end up losing a game because of it, a lot of people would go, aha, that's, we told you all along. I'm not sure if I agree with that narrative. I mean, nowadays, defensive abilities are supposed to be right throughout the team from 1 to 15. Defense is a huge part of the game, and especially for both Leinster and Ireland, you need a 10 who can defend. And we're kind of spoiled when we had Sexton, because he was he got so much into the defensive side of things. He was so hard to get past. He made himself difficult. His channel was almost closed down tight. But generally in rugby, the 10 isn't supposed to exactly be your best defender. I think if the one area where Sam is lacking is his defense now, and the one area where he has to improve his defense, I think that's a good place. Could be a good place for him to be. We'll see if he improves down the line. So that's why I would say he does have a high ceiling. He does have, his game can grow in that. I remember there was a lot of talk. I mean, not even a 10. James Lowe, when he first stepped up for Ireland, was like, oh, his defense. What about his defending? Then he practically, almost literally, won a game for us with a tackle on Rico Iwani against the All Blacks. So there is scope to improve. And James Lowe started a lot older playing for Ireland than Sam did. So listen, that's a debate that's going to keep going on, but I do like this article. Do check it out from Over the Hill Prop. Okay, moving on to our second article now. This is from John O'Sullivan in the Irish Times. The headline reads, new laws questioned after rampaging force of nature Bundyaki turns the game. This is about the game at the weekend, but it's not so much about the game, it's about the reactions. And basically what John O'Sullivan does here is he takes a load of articles from around the rugby media and he just, talks about what's said in those articles. What a crazy concept. I don't see how anyone would be crazy enough to try that out, especially not in a video anyway. But no, seriously, he's looking at the reaction in the Welsh and / British media to the win over the weekend. And there were different varying reactions, but I think the one focus on was this 20-minute red card. And it did help Ireland in the end that we could replace Ringrose, especially because the sub we had to bring on was who it was. The quote I've chosen here is, Aki played a key role in this win for Ireland, perhaps the key role. And you could say that's true. He was very strong when he came on. He gave away a penalty. He jackled a penalty. We've all seen that image of him with his what I call Bloody Bundy. It's a really iconic image that's being used everywhere now, and it's brilliant. But I don't know. It on the 20-minute red, I mean, I put this on the record. Whether it benefits us or not, I'm not a fan. I'd want to go back. If you've done a red card offense, you go off, and it punishes your team as well. I don't see the logic behind, bring someone back on, all for the sake of supposedly, this notion that it ruins the game. I would argue that tackles that endanger someone's head injury, long-term concussion and head injury, that kind of ruins the game a little bit more. hearing about people and especially showing these top level players the right tackle technique. Where younger people are watching, their schoolboys and all, schoolgirls and all playing the game. They want to improve their own technique. So I would argue that would be, that would ruin the game more if they're tackling wrong. But anyway, it was an interesting article there. I mean, obviously, in the debate over the 20-minute red card, the Welsh fans would be most animated about that right now because the most recent game was seriously affected by it. But I'm just saying, I'm still not a fan. I mean, yes, it helped Ireland. It was great to be able to bring Bunty back on, and we won the game, and I want my team to win, but I'm still not a fan of the 20-minute red. And, you could argue maybe we still would have won even if he hadn't come on. We could have that discussion anyway. Anyway, that's John O'Sullivan of the Irish Times. Check that out. Okay, third article comes from the 42.ie. I thought this was a quiet news week for articles. So some of these, there's a bit of crossover between some of these stories. Of course, what that guarantees is that as soon as I finish recording, I'll go on my news aggregator, and I'll see that there's exactly 5 brand new super stories that everyone's going to be talking about by the time I have this video made. That's almost guaranteed. But anyway, this third article is to do with that Gary Ringrose as well. His hearing is from the 42.ie. The headline reads, Ireland's Ringrose to face hearing on Thursday after red card against Wales. Just a basically simple article saying that all of us who are signed up to Six Nations media, we got the notification. You get the notification that a disciplinary panel has been called. So this is the way the procedure works. It's going to be, he got a red card, so he must face the panel, and that's going to be on Thursday. We all have this talk about bringing the good biscuits to these meetings, to get a favorable ruling. Of course, there's always talk about, whether or not the rulings are too lenient, or whether they're sort of tailored to make sure that these players are playing in important games. I don't think there's any way to save Gary from playing France in the next game. I don't think, there was jokes online about how, they could pick a Blackrock College match in the All-Ireland League, and they can pick Leinster's match against Cardiff, and they can pick a junior thirds game somewhere, and that can be 3 of his matches for his band. I mean, that's all funny and all, but I mean, what they did with Ntamack, I thought was interesting for his red, which was a worse red, I thought. They're both red, but I thought Ntamack's was worse. He got, was it 3 weeks reduced to 2, with this tackle school or whatever it is they call it, but they can't call it 3 weeks because the way the Six Nations works is there's 2 bye weeks, and players like Ntamack, even though there's top 14 matches in those off weeks, he's not going to be playing in those. So if you say 3 weeks, they'll just count those as weeks. You got to pick the actual matches of consequence for that player. So I have a funny feeling that Ringrose will end up effectively missing the last 2 games of Ireland's campaign. That would be my prediction. We'll see what happens on Thursday. They might say it's 3 reduced to 2, but that's effectively 2. Is that enough for serious head knocks, whether it's Ringrose or plays for my team, or Ntamack who plays for another team? I don't think so. I think, it's supposed to be a deterrent. You've seen bigger bans given for supposedly lesser things, but that's a debate for another day. But anyway, we'll see how his hearing goes on Thursday, and let's just hope he brings decent biscuits anyway. That's not going to make them penalize him even more. Okay. Article 4. And this is our clickbait of the week. And we are going back to our good old friends at ruck.co.uk, which, they never fail when it comes to clickbait. This is an article. Now, this is an interesting story in itself. In fact, I don't even think it needs the clickbait headline. The story is that the headline reads, Jack Willis set to return to England ahead of 2027 Rugby World Cup. Now that says, you hear that article, that means he is returning to England ahead of 2027 World Cup. That means it's a done deal. That makes you think it's a done deal. Whoa, bing, I'm going to click that. The actual reality of the article is somewhat different. The quote I've chosen is, a lifeline could be in place, a break clause in Willis's contract that would allow him to sign for a Premiership club for the 2027-28 season, potentially making him eligible for England's campaign in Australia. So if he signs for a club that he wouldn't have played for yet, even when the World Cup kicks off, but if he announces, say, in February 2027, I'm leaving Toulouse, I'm signing for, apparently Bristol are interested, as are Saracens, right? So I'm signing for Bristol, let's just say. And they announced that in February. So he even though he won't have played for Bristol yet, because he's announced himself as a Bristol player, so maybe July 1st, he or when the Top 14 season is over, he officially becomes a Bristol player. That will make him eligible. Now, for me, I think it's all crap anyway. I think England should be picking him wherever he's playing. Okay. And to be honest with you, and if they do it this way, it's not really fair on whoever it is, Curry or whoever it is that's wearing that 7 jersey up to that point, that this guy just swans in over from France. I'd rather they were all together in the squad, no matter where they're playing, and pick for the same England team all along. And I think Jack Willis would have easily had that number 7 jersey locked down. I still think you should have the number 7 jersey for the Lions. And I'm a big Josh Van der Fleer fan, but I still think Willis is the guy for that role. But anyway, listen, with that debate's going on, but it's interesting if he does, he has this clause in his contract. It'd be interesting to see if they activate it. So it was an interesting story anyway. They didn't need that headline saying that he's there, he's set to return. That makes you think he's doing it. But anyway, listen, that's clickbait all over the thing. I go to these articles so you don't have to. Anyway, that's my justification there. Okay, enough on that. Final article, number 5. This is from a simple article from Reuters. It's about New Zealand's Nanu makes comeback in Toulon at 42. Now, I've been following Major League Rugby for the past couple of seasons. Their games to be shown on the Rugby Network. It's a free streaming service. All of their games in entirety. Obviously, I don't watch them live, but when I can, I get a chance to speed watch them during the week and get a sense of what the leagues are like. I've seen Manonu play a couple of times for the San Diego Legion. He's doing really well, but then again, it is Major League Rugby. The standard isn't exactly that. They talk about defense. Defense isn't great from 1 to 15. So it kind of it suits them. And you could argue that Major League Rugby for a lot of players is like a retirement home. They'll make a decent amount of money, but they don't have to do that much, and they'll still shine because the defenses aren't as good. And he's a classic example of that. San Diego Legion have been doing relatively well win wise anyway in Major League Rugby week in, week out. But for him to come back to the Top 14 is interesting. Now, obviously, he's coming at the end of the season, so it's not like he's not there for the full 26 plus Champions Cup schedule. He's coming back for the last few games. He's doing a kind of a Jordy Barrett kind of a thing with Toulon, and they're calling him, officially they call it a medical joker, though in his case you could say he's a medical marvel coming back to play at this level. But he's a great player to be able to add to the squad. Toulon, they're second in the Top 14. They've got Saracens in the last 16 of the Champions Cup, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on. But it's interesting. Will he just play a role off the bench, or will they actually start him? We'll see what happens there. But I just thought that was an interesting story. Okay, listen, that's enough. That completes this week's Front 5. Remember, we do a lot of other regular features on the 80 Plus column. You'll get all those Front 5 links, the actual links to these articles. Plus, there's an injury update where I pick a possible Leinster 23 for the game against Cardiff this weekend. Our Troll Patrol feature where we detain a social media commentator and charge them with gaslightery and general online mayhem. There's also a one-stop shop for updates on all the other rugby tournaments like the AIL, Top 14, Super Rugby. You can get it all by heading over to our website at harpinonrugby.blog. Next up here at Harpin Manor, we have our usual preview and a rep pod for Leinster v Cardiff. For this match, I'm actually bringing my 9-year-old daughter to her first ever Leinster game, so I should have a lot to harp on there. So please be sure to subscribe to our channel as well as our other social media platforms. You can find them at linktree/harpinonrugby. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.